Starting in 5 seconds. I am grateful to my friend, director of the International Academy of Indian Culture, to have asked me to lay the foundation stone of the Academy's building and to inaugurate the function. I associate myself with both of these functions with pleasure. For some time past, I have been familiar with the objects of and the work done by the International Academy of Indian Culture, and I feel that despite its limited resources, the Academy has been doing valuable work in the field of research. I believe there are some other institutions also carrying on researches in Indology and other branches of ancient thought, but I do not think any of them has been able to cover such a range of subjects and such a wide field as to include Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Central Asia as the International Academy of Indian Culture. Seeing the importance of this work, it seems essential that the Academy should be encouraged in its work as far as possible. Search for knowledge is as interesting a pursuit as the acquiring of it. The ancient knowledge which recorded history and old monuments unravel to us has its limitations. These sources of history do not carry us very far, and in some cases, they do not tell us enough of the currents and cross currents of popular thought. Luckily, we have another source of having a peep into the dim and forgotten past. That source consists of ancient work and manuscripts found in a variety of languages and scripts. An examination of this data and its proper integration can also add to our knowledge of that period. Not much by way of research has till now been done so far as the country of the East are concerned, although scholars are of the view that exchange of thought and mutual give and take on the intellectual level has not been less in Asia than in other parts of the world. By not assimilating this knowledge, we are not only keeping our information incomplete but are also unable to access correctly men's intellectual progress through the ages. That is why proper integration of the bits of knowledge scattered in various lands is not only essential for the lifting of the curtain over patches of ignorance but also for having an integrated history of intellectual evolution of man. This is being done now. The story as to how thoughts travel almost like electricity from one place to another, influencing and inspiring peoples of far flung lands, is extremely interesting. Short stories of ancient India and our social and religious thoughts spread in far off territories, crossing many seas and scaling many a high mountain peak. In the same way, the Buddhist faith and thought, and the Buddhist conception of art traveled to foreign lands at a time when, comparatively speaking, the means of communication were more or less non existent. Persistent efforts of devout thinkers and scholars gave wing to those thoughts and, like saplings, planted them in other countries where they blossomed and bore fruit. In all these countries, Buddhist thought and traditions were assimilated in and influenced by local thought. It has been the effort of the International Academy of Indian Culture to present all those currents of thought in a readily assimilable and integrated form. It is gratifying to note that in its efforts, the Academy has met with considerable success, as a result of which it is going to launch its publication program, making a beginning with this. This book is a collective record and integrated view of the many currents of thoughts that crossed each other throughout vast territories in the Himalayan fastness of Tibet and from the Pacific islands of Indonesia up to the snow covered areas in Siberia and Central Asia. India thought that had influenced all this vast area in ancient times. I hope the publication of this will throw much light on the undetermined history of these ancient countries and the exchange of thought that one took place among them. I am glad that the International Academy of Indian Culture has planned the publication of such a monumental work. All this information about the ancient history of Eastern country and their mutual relationship is coming to us at a time when there is an upsurge of awakening discernible in them. This knowledge is therefore of particular importance to us. Not only the countries of Asia, but all the nations of the world are getting closer to one another, and all of them feel that the government would can be saved from destructive wars by strengthening mutual ties of goodwill and friendship. Our knowledge of the relations which substituted among the various countries in ancient times is bound to lend strength to the basis of international friendship. Let us hope that the publication of this and also the new awakening will inspire a sense of intellectual stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Railways, roads, and rivers are the lifeline of our country. I feel privileged to present the first combined budget of independent India that includes the railways also. We are now in a position to synergize the investments in railways, roads, waterways, and civil aviation for 2017-18. The total capital and development expenditure of railways has been pegged at 1,31,000 crores. This includes rupees 55,000 crores provided by the government. Among other things, the railways will focus on four major areas, namely 1. Passenger safety, 2. Capital and development works, 3. Cleanliness, and 4. Finance and accounting reforms. For passenger safety, a Rashtriya Rail Sanrakshak Kosh will be created with a corpus of rupees 1 lakh crore over a period of 5 years. Besides seed capital from the government, the railways will arrange the balance resources from their own revenues and other sources. Government will lay down clear-cut guidelines and a timeline for implementing various safety works to be funded from this course. Unmanned level crossing on broad gauge lines will be eliminated by 2020. Expert international assistance will be harnessed to improve safety, preparedness, and maintenance practices. In the next 3 years, the throughput is proposed to be enhanced by 10%. This will be done through the modernization and upgradation of identified corridors. Railway lines of 3,500 kilometers will be commissioned in 2017-18 as against 2,800 kilometers in last year. Steps will be taken to launch dedicated trains for tourism and pilgrimage. Railways have set up joint ventures with 9 state governments. 70 projects have been identified for construction and development. A beginning has been made with regard to station redevelopment. At least 25 stations are expected to be awarded during this year for station redevelopment. 500 stations will be made differentially abled friendly by providing lifts and escalators. It is proposed to feed about 7,000 stations with solar power in the medium term. A beginning has already been made in 300 stations. Works will be taken up for 2,000 railway stations as part of 1,000 megawatt solar mission. Our focus is on Swachh Rail. SMS based Clean My Coach service has been started. It is now proposed to introduce Coach Mitra facility, a single window interface to register all coach related complaints and requirements for the facility of passenger as such. By 2019, all coaches of Indian Railways will be fitted with bio-toilets. Pilot plants for environmental friendly disposal of solid waste and conversion of biodegradable waste to energy are being set up at New Delhi and Jaipur railway station. 5 more such solid waste management plants are now being taken up. Today, Indian Railways face stiff competition from other modes of transportation which are dominated by the private sector. Transformative measures have to be undertaken to make Indian Railways competitive to retain their position of preeminence. The following steps will therefore be taken. One, railways will implement end-to-end integrated transport solutions for select commodities through partnership with logistics players who would provide both front and back end connectivity. Rolling stocks and practices will be customized to transport perishable goods, especially agricultural products, to railways will offer competitive ticket booking facility to the public at large. Service charge on e-tickets booked through IRCTC has been withdrawn. Cashless reservations have gone up from 58% to 68%. 3. As part of accounting reforms, accrual based financial statements will be rolled out by March 2019. It will be our continuous endeavor to improve the operating ratio of the railways. The tariffs of railways would be fixed taking into consideration cost, quality of service, social obligation, and competition from other forms of transport. Metro rail is emerging as an important mode of urban transportation. A new metro rail policy will be announced with focus on innovative models of implementation and financing, as well as standardization and indigenization of hardware and software. This will open up new job opportunity for our youth. A new Metro Rail Act will be enacted by rationalizing the existing laws. This will facilitate greater private participation and investment in construction and operation. An effective multi-modal logistics and transport sector will make our economy more competitive. A specific program for development of multimodal logistics parks together with multimodal transport facilities will be drawn up and implemented. Select airports in Tier 2 cities will be taken up for operation and maintenance in the PPP mode. Airport Authority of India Act will be amended to enable effective monetization of land assets. The resources so raised will be utilized for airport upgradation for transportation sector as a whole, including rail, roads, shipping. I have provided rupees 2 lakh crores this year. This magnitude of investment will spur a huge amount of economic activity across the country and create more job opportunities. This has been the one of the important landmark aim as per Government of India right now. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, agriculture is neglected as against the industrial sector. If we say about investment, about encouragement given to the industry and the agriculture, and a comparison between them will show that agriculture is being discriminated as against industry. Amongst agriculture itself, in the irrigated area and non-irrigated area, there is a vast difference. All benefits like fertilizer subsidy and cooperative credit, all these benefits which are supposed to be given to the agriculturist are supplied to the irrigated sector, and the agriculturist there alone get those benefits. In non-irrigated area where the agriculture is rain fed or where it is all dry land farming, they are not properly treated. They are not being properly looked after. The government is totally negligent so far as that sector is concerned. So far as the drought prone areas are concerned in our country, there are areas where there is drought repeatedly. In some states, they had drought once, twice, or even continuously for some years, and now in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and in some other parts of the country, there has been drought repeatedly, no once or twice, but continuously every year. But the government has not done anything what it should have done there. The government of Maharashtra has asked for rupees 150 crores. So far as the drinking water is concerned, assistance to the agriculturist is very meager and they are suffering because their crops have been lost, and the government has hardly given rupees 25 crores or rupees 30 crores, and because of this insufficient assistance, the work which has to be done to meet the scarcity condition in Maharashtra is not being done properly. I would urge upon the government that this should be looked into and permanent measures to remove these conditions in those drought prone areas should be taken. How those problems can be solved, how a particular investment has to be made, all these have to be looked into. Certain allocation has to be made because in those drought prone areas the allocation has to be made because in those drought prone areas the allocations are very scarce. This is not fair. Unemployment problem has been discussed at length here, so I will not say much about it. But the Honorable Prime Minister has said in his budget speech that computerization is going to help reduce unemployment. I myself do not understand this argument. I have discussed this matter with many of our friends. I urge upon the members of the ruling party and the government to explain this factor as to how it is that computerization is going to help reduce unemployment. It can be argued that we will produce more and so more people will be employed. Then there will be more production and jobs. Here I would like to point out that so far as production is concerned, the production is already in plenty. It is very good to give a clarion call to produce more. The Honorable Prime Minister is very much interested in more production. We are fighting for more production. But if there is no purchasing power with the common man, then what is the use of having production only? Now, cloth is available in the market in plenty, grains are available in plenty, but the common people do not have the purchasing capacity to purchase cloth and grains. They cannot have two square meals a day. They cannot have sufficient clothing for themselves. This factor should be taken into account while saying so. The purchasing capacity of the common people should be increased. I would like to draw the attention of the government to an important issue which has been pending since 1956. There is a border dispute between the government of Maharashtra and the government of Karnataka. Certain people in boundary areas want to join Maharashtra when the linguistic state were formed in 1956. At the time of reorganization of states, it was expected that certain parts in between the boundary would be given to Maharashtra. Since then, these people are expressing their desire that they should be allowed to join Maharashtra. So far as democracy is concerned, in democracy, the will of the people is more important. Since 1956, in all elections, they have expressed their desires by winning the elections to join Maharashtra, but till now, justice is being denied to them. About drinking water, government has again said that there is not sufficient drinking water so far as thousands of villages are concerned. It is very disappointing that even after 50 years of independence, we are still not able to provide sufficient potable water to the villagers. For bigger cities like Bombay, drinking water is being brought from hundreds of miles by laying big pipes. But so far as villages are concerned, they are being neglected. In Maharashtra, more than 25,000 villages are suffering from want of potable water. Even in rainy season, there are hundreds of villages where water has to be supplied through tankers. I would urge upon the government to look into this matter. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. I am grateful for the opportunity that has been afforded to me to meet you this afternoon. During the last 4 or 5 days, I have been visiting places which have afforded solace to millions and millions of people for ages past and which are going to afford solace of a similar kind to generations yet to be born. While visiting these places, I have also seen the great architecture which is a specialty of these parts, the like of which you do not see in that part of the country from which I come. I have been reminded time and again for the greatness of those who conceived the idea of erecting these temples, of those who actually worked on them and ultimately succeeded in creating these works of perfect art. And I must confess that I feel somewhat jealous because I cannot find that kind of thing in the north to compare with these great things in the south. I do not regard them or regard you as different from me or from that part of the country from which I come. Therefore, I feel that our ancestors, our seers and sages, in their great wisdom, have bound us all together by silken ties, which time vicissitudes, foreign invasions, and political upheavals have not been able to cut asunder. And today, India, right from Kanyakumari to Kailash, is one, and God willing, shall ever continue to remain one. We have had differences of language, of custom, of ways of living prevalent in this country for centuries, but underlying all these differences, there has been an undercurrent of unity, nay, of full unity, which has kept India together in spite of political differences in this vast land. It has been rightly pointed out by you, Mr. Vice Chancellor, that there is a genius of reconciling different ideas which is inherent in our land, and it is that genius which has preserved this ancient land, its glory, its civilization, and its culture, which are even today, I make bold to say, not inferior to that of any other part of the world. Until, say, 2 centuries ago, our people in this country were in no way inferior to any other parts of the world in any matter, be that in the sphere of arts or sciences. During the last 2 centuries or so, fallen far behind others now, with the achievements of material sciences, there is a journal stamped in favor of material things. We are sometimes in a hurry to discard things which have come down to us from generations past simply because we cannot reconcile them with modern things. But I say, with respect to all friends who hold that view, that the scientific spirit requires that nothing should be discarded and nothing should be accepted without examination or analysis, and I plead that there is much in our past which has to be studied and examined, the true meaning of which has to be appreciated, and when that is done, I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever that we shall never have reason to feel sorry later. I have no doubt we shall, in that event, ever be able to look to other people with a certain amount of pride, for after all, our past is not to be despised. It is something which can inspire the present and the future. Today, the world is passing through a great crisis. Technical achievements in science have reached a stage where, unless and until they are controlled and guided by moral and spiritual forces, they will destroy themselves and the world. And there it is that our great heritage can play its part. But can we do that today? I am afraid not. We have to acquire that position for ourselves by reviving something of the past, by modernizing it and adapting it to modern conditions, and also by adopting something of the modern world to equip ourselves for that great task. Unfortunately, a great leader who understood the significance of the past and the significance of the modern world is no more with us. Gandhiji was in his own way trying to bring out a conciliation between the two. He had, I believe, hoped to be able to live long enough to give true guidance to the world at large. While he was engaged in the struggle for freedom, he refused to go to foreign countries because he felt that he had no message to give to the world until he had found a good place for it in his own country. When freedom was achieved, and if God permitting things had settled down, he would have been able to give his great message of reconciliation to the world. Unfortunately, that was not to be. The great legacy that he has left us is there, and it is for us to prove ourselves worthy of that great legacy if we can look upon our universities as the centers where this conciliation would grow. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Honorable Speaker, I rise to present the budget for the year 2020-21. In May 2019, Prime Minister Modi received a massive mandate to form the government again with renewed vigor. Under his leadership, we commit ourselves to serve the people of India with all humility and dedication. People of India have unequivocally given their verdict for not just political stability and also reposed faith in our economic policies. This is the budget to boost their incomes and enhance their purchasing power. Only through higher growth we can achieve that and have our youth gainfully and meaningfully employed. Let our businesses be innovative, healthy, and solvent with use of technology. For today's youth, born at the turn of the century, for every member of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes who seek a better life, for every woman wishing to stand up and get counted, for every individual from the minority sections of our society. This budget aims to have your aspirations and hopes addressed. We wish to open up vistas for a vibrant and dynamic economy with a gentle breeze of new technology. This vibrant India shall be a caring society which shall attend to its weak, the old, and the vulnerable among its citizens. During 2014-19, our government brought in a paradigm shift in governance. This shift was characterized by a twin focus: fundamental structural reform and inclusive growth. Fundamentals of the economy are strong, and that has ensured macroeconomic stability. Inflation has been well contained. Banks saw a thorough cleaning up of accumulated loans of the past decade, and then they were recapitalized. Companies were provided an exit through the IBC, several steps on the formalization of the economy were taken up. Of the structural reforms, the goods and services tax has been the most historic in our country. Its chief architect is not with us today. I pay homage to the visionary leader, late Sri Arun Jaitley ji. At the time of rollout of GST, he had said, and I quote, "It will be an India where the center and states will work harmoniously towards the common goal of shared prosperity." The unanimity of the constitutional amendment and the consensus of the GST Council highlights that India can rise above narrow politics for the nation's interest. With the GST, country's interests are strengthened. True to this vision for the historic structural reform, the goods and services tax has been gradually maturing into a tax that has integrated the country economically. It has consolidated numerous taxes and cesses to one tax and facilitated formalization of economy. It has resulted in the efficiency gains in logistic and transport sectors. The turnaround time for trucks has witnessed a substantial reduction to the tune of 20% due to abolition of checkpost in GST. The dreaded Inspector Raj has also vanished. It has also led to significant benefits to MSME by way of enhanced threshold and composition limits. The effective tax incidence on almost every commodity came down substantially through several state rate reductions. An annual benefit of rupees 1 lakh crore has been extended to consumers. It amounts to 10% reduction in overall tax incidence. An average household now saves about 4% on its monthly spends on account of reduced GST rates. During this phase of maturing, GST did face certain challenges. This was natural as transition was effecting. GST Council has been proactive in resolving issues during transition. In the last 2 years, we have added more than 60 lakh new taxpayers. A total of about 40 crore returns were filed, 800 crore invoices were uploaded, and 105 crore e-way bills were generated. There has been extensive engagement with stakeholders. A simplified new return system is being introduced from April 1, 2020. A former Prime Minister had once voiced a concern that the fruits of the welfare schemes were not reaching the intended citizens. The common and deserving citizens was only receiving 15 paisa of every rupee sent for him. Guided by Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, our government and our Prime Minister added manifold speed and scaled up the implementation of schemes and programs that directly benefited the poor and the disadvantaged. I wish to list out only a few as examples. One, welfare schemes with direct benefit transfer embedded in them. 2, sanitation and water as provision of basic needs and as a measure of preventive healthcare. 3, healthcare through Ayushman Bharat. 4, clean energy through Ujjwala and solar power. 5, financial inclusion, credit support, insurance protection to vulnerable sections and pension scheme. 6, digital penetration with broadband and UPI. And 7, affordable housing for all through PMAY. The milestones achieved are unprecedented, globally recognized, and benchmarked against the international indices. This strategy changed the established order of a few individuals, cornering most of the benefits, and was appreciated by the people. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. First of all, I am beholden to your foundation for having given me this opportunity to be with you here this day. Your annual lectures have already become extremely popular and useful. I find that a long line of eminent personalities have been speaking to you on the Foundation's annual day. They have presented their points of view to you. They have brought to bear their experiences on the issues of population and development. Going through some of their speeches, I found that there is very little that has been unsaid or remains to be said on this particular subject. Hence, I find myself rather in a very difficult position to propound anything new or worthwhile. It is my handicap also that I do not belong to the profession of those who have been working very hard on this particular issue, and therefore what I would speak to you today will not be anything new, but I will try to minimize the torture of listening to me by trying to be as brief as possible because I think that it is the only way to earn your goodwill. Well, friends, for some of you who are present here, you know that I belong to a particular school of thought in this country which firmly believes that we have a great future ahead, and I am bullish, I would say, on India. But certainly, there is one subject on which I feel cowed down and I do not feel strong enough to defend our records, and that is the question of population. I think some of us have been guilty of not giving the same prominence to this subject which it deserved. Not that there were no proponents of this particular thought or idea that population is a very important dimension of a country's growth problems. Not that there were no people who were telling us why we should give more importance to it, but somehow most of us were so carried away by the ideas of sheer economic growth and development that we thought that this is a problem of number which could easily be solved. But then, when I look in retrospect and think of the days which were given to us to do something, I feel that it was one of the ironies of life that we wanted to serve the people. We forgot about the numbers. We belong to a civilization, a culture which celebrates marriages. We have a fascinating concept of weddings and wedding ceremonies. We spend lots of money on sweets and laddus when babies are born, yet at the same time, we discover what a horrifying figure the people become when the numbers become unmanageable, and therefore we felt that perhaps the developmental side would remain gloomy and dark unless and until the population side is brightened up and looked into a very different manner from where we have been looking at it. In fact, when you look at the prospects of India with 850 million people already in position, and we are marching towards a mark called billion number people on this earth, we find that perhaps we will not really be able to take care of the welfare of those great numbers. That is where we feel that we are perhaps caught in a trap. In the language of the economist, it is the Malthusian trap. That is the power of earth to grow, to produce what you call the needs of the people will be totally overtaken by the power of the people to expand in numbers. About 200 years ago, when the 18th century was coming to an end, Europe witnessed a similar situation. Hundreds and thousands of people were sleeping in absolute discomfort in the lanes and by lanes of London, Paris, and other places. There was a wave of unrest all over. There were disturbing factors all over. There was a tide which was running so high that people did not know and could not understand as to what its meaning was. But one thing was clear, that throughout Europe there was uneasiness, there were convulsions, there were revolts to which they could not attribute one single cause to explain it. In France, of course, they found some sort of an answer in the failure of its economy and the collapse of its finances, but in the rest of Europe, they were becoming victims of swelling numbers of people, in that they would not understand as to what was motivating these people to call and to question their status quo, to shake the roots, as one would say, the institutions of Europe. Then there came a discerning man by name Malthus, and he said that this is all happening because the power of the population has overtaken the power of the earth to produce the needs of the people. He saw them coming into the streets of London. He saw them sleeping on the naked earth without any support or without any cover. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. In other words, if the argument of the appellant therein was accepted, it could have resulted in confining the transfer of the raw material from the ship by pipeline to the port area, but it could not be taken to a refinery located outside the port area. But the provision did contemplate transporting of the material from the ship to the refineries as also to terminals and vice versa. It was in the context that the court proceeded to hold that a purposive construction was needed to avoid a situation of absurdity, much turned on the presence of the words in the port area. Therefore, keeping in mind the clear object of the notification, which was self evident, the court added the words or through to the words in the port area. This facilitated the transfer of the raw material from the ships to a refinery or a terminal which need not have to be located in the port area. We must understand the decision of this court in the aforesaid context. The rationale and principle appear in opposite to the cases before us. We also do bear in mind that in paragraph 8 bracket 1 construction of pipelines inter alia was permitted. It is thereafter that in paragraph 8 bracket 2nd under CRZ2 clause 6 contemplated permitting of storage of non-hazardous cargo such as edible oil, fertilizers and food grain in notified ports. We may broaden our inquiry into the relevant contents of CRZ3. CRZ3 of the 2011 notification was divided into Area A, which inter alia dealt with areas up to 200 meters from HTL on the landward side. In the case of seafront, the said clause proclaimed further that the said area would be a no development zone. We notice that in CRZ 3 the NDZ was not to be applicable in such areas within any port limits. Thus, the expression within made its appearance in relation to notified port limits again. In the permitted activities in the NDZ under Area A viz up to 200 meters as aforesaid, we find clause E, which permitted facilities for receipt and storage of petroleum products and liquefied petroleum gas as specified in Annexure 2. Area B of CRZ3 is described as the area comprised from 200 meters to 500 meters. Under the same, we notice that again facilities for receipt and storage of petroleum products and liquefied natural gas as specified in Annexure 2 was permitted. We may bear in mind that the very same activity had also been contemplated in Area A of CRZ-3, viz. The area comprised to 200 meters of the high tide line of the landward area in the case of the seafront inter alia. Interestingly, when it comes to storage of non hazardous cargo such as edible oils, fertilizers, and food grain in the notified ports, it was permitted activity in Area B of CRZ-3 under Clause 4 thereof, that is, an area located between 200 meters to 500 meters. It must be noticed that CRZ-3 had been classified in paragraph 7 essentially as relatively undisturbed area which did not belong to either CRZ-1 or 2, which included the coastal zone in rural areas, both developed and underdeveloped, and also areas within municipal limits or in other legally designated urban areas which were not substantially built up. We have already noticed the classification of CRZ2 earlier as areas which had been developed up to or close to the shoreline. Can it then be said that storage of non-hazardous cargo such as edible oil, fertilizers, food grain permitted in the notified ports in CRZ-3 Area B be also permitted in CRZ-3 Area A? Going by the contents of CRZ-3 under activities which were permitted in the NDZ, we are unable to find any clause which permitted such storage of non-hazardous cargo including edible oil inter alia. Therefore, in the NDZ area falling under Area A of CRZ-3, it may have been impermissible. We have made this discussion only to remind ourselves that in interpretation of the notification, we are concerned with a pursuit of a purposive interpretation or a search for a rationale which the court finds fair may meet with limitations which flow from the object of the maker of the notification being confined to the plain meaning of the words used. No doubt, a situation found in the facts of the case reported in may call for a different approach, reverting back to the controversy projected from the difference between the words within and in. We may notice the following discussion of the NGT, which is a specialized body consisting of a judicial member and a technical member in a statutory appeal under the Act in Compact Oxford English Dictionary. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. The Learned Counsel, while referring to Sinha Commission report, has submitted that the report on the basis of which the amendment was enacted itself stated that economic criteria would not result in homogeneous class. Learned Counsel has argued that in the absence of quantifiable data, one could not create a class for which protective measures are to be taken. The sad report concluded that if poverty is kept as a baseline for reservation, then it should have in its ambit all irrespective of their class, more so because the poor of SCs, STs, and OBCs are worse off than those of general category. He has further argued that the condition precedent for the protective clause is extent of discrimination. Hence, protective action for a class that is neither a homogeneous class nor is discriminated against in violative of the basic structure of the Constitution. Learned Counsel has relied upon the decision of this court in Indrasani case to submit that economic criteria cannot be the sole basis for classification. He has further argued in the alternative that even if reservation on grounds of economic criteria is to be given, EWS ought to include those who are living below the poverty line. Learned Counsel, while adding on to the submissions already advanced by the preceding counsel for petitioners, posed that the originalist understanding of reservation is that it can solely be granted as an anti discriminatory measure and not as an anti deprivation measure. Hence, the amendment in question cannot sustain itself as it addresses the deprivation faced by an individual and not discrimination. The learned counsel would further argue that even if it is assumed that reservation can be granted as an anti deprivation measure, still the amendment violates the Equality Code as it excludes the SCs, STs, and OBCs who are poorer than the poor of forward class without any intangible differentia and its nexus with the object sought to be achieved, opposing the justification that these classes are already protected by way of Articles 15 bracket 4 and 16 bracket 4. He has submitted that the purpose of Articles 15 bracket 4 and 16 bracket 4 is to protect a group and to counter the historical oppression done to them, whereas the amendment in question deals with situational deprivation, mainly economic criteria, and is intended to protect an individual purposes and entities of both the protections being different. The learned counsel has re emphasized on the submissions that statistically the backward class poor are worse off than forward class poor and their poverty is deeper, more intense, and likely to be stickier and persistent. He has relied on Sinha Commission report, Niti Aayog multidimensional poverty index along with other reports and has argued that the question before the Sinha Commission was whether there could be reservation for journal category people not covered in any other category. The report itself stated that the backward class poor are poorer than the upper class poor. He would underscore the point that poverty is deeply linked to the caste of an individual and the perception surrounding that status. The Learned Council has further submitted that grant of reservation as a measure of affirmative action is a way for reparation and does not lead to economic upliftment. The object of economic upliftment of deprived sections of society can be achieved through other measures of poverty alleviation, but reservation is not the answer. While contending that Articles 15 bracket 1 and 16 bracket 1 are part of the basic structure of constitution and that it is only in furtherance of substantive equality that formal equality can be breached. He has submitted that exclusion on the basis of caste straight away breaches formal equality. Further exclusion of those who are arguably more impacted by this criterion violates substantive equality to hitting the equality code and resultantly violating the basic structure of the constitution. In another line of arguments, the Learned Council has put forth the proposition that the words other than in Articles 15 bracket 6 and 16 bracket 6 should be read as in addition to, thereby including SCs, STs, and OBCs within them and furthering the basic structure. He has placed reliance on the decision of this court to submit that if two interpretations are possible, one which destroys the basic structure and the other which enhances it, then purposive approach enhancing the basic structure of the constitution is to be taken and not the literal approach. He has concluded the submissions while quoting from the judgment of this court in K.C. Vasant Kumar case that lower the caste, the poorer are its members. Learned Council, while stressing upon the equality code and it being part of the basic structure, has argued on two facets. First, as to whether the inclusion of new class of reservation solely on the basis of economic criteria was constitutionally permissible, and second, as to whether the exclusion of SCs, STs, and OBCs from this newly created class was constitutionally permissible. She mapped the historical background of reservations. Stop.